Hi, everybody. My name is Linda Abraham. I'm the president and founder of Accepted, and I'm going to be presenting Get Accepted to Harvard Business School today. Thank you very much for coming. I also want to tell you a little bit about me since we're going to be spending the next hour together. I've been an MBA admissions consultant since 1994. I've been interviewed and quoted in media like Poets and Quants, the Wall Street Journal, U.S. News, Business Week, and others regarding MBA admissions, most recently yesterday. And I'm the co-founder and first president of the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consulting. I'm looking forward to sharing my 20-plus years of admissions experience with you. And before we begin, I wanted to mention a few to-dos that will help you maximize your time here and one that will help us improve these webinars. First, if you have not yet downloaded your webinar worksheet, please do so. I recommend that you actually print it out, but that's up to you. You'll find that it is linked to in your control panel, and it will help you get the most from today's presentation. I'm also going to ask open-ended questions at certain points in the webinar, and I'm going to ask you to use the question window to provide your answers. There'll also be time for you to ask questions. You can post questions at any time, but it's going to be used for give and take during the webinar. At certain other times, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand, as I did a few minutes ago, just to make sure the sound was working. And that means that you click on the hand icon, two icons underneath the horizontal orange arrow on your control panel. No need to do that now, but if you see a hand icon, that's what it's for. Number 4, you can win. We'll have a contest towards the end of the webinar based solely on content presented during the webinar, so stay tuned. And this is the last of my housekeeping items. When you leave, you're going to receive a brief survey. Please fill it out. It is short. We value your feedback. I review it all, and as a matter of fact, we use the information you provide to both improve our webinars and to add new ones to our menu of webinars. Now, I would like to test your hand-raising skill. Please raise your hand if you are here because business school, and specifically Harvard Business School, will whisk you on your way to the career of your dreams. If that's why you're here, raise your hand. Yeah, most of you both know how to raise your hands and are here for the right reason. It will help you, that's for sure. Okay, I'm sorry there's a truck outside, but the other thing I want to mention before we get started, and this is probably the favorite part of any webinar, is that Accepted is having a sale starting tomorrow. MBA admissions services. You can get $100, $200, $500, or $1,000 off our services, depending upon how much you buy. Details will be posted tomorrow on the website. You'll probably also be getting emails about it. Again, it's coupon code take place from June 21st through 28th. And again, 21st is tomorrow. Now, I always like to start the webinar by getting a sense of my audience, learning a little bit about you. So in the question window, could you please tell me where you're located? City and state in the United States, city and country if you're outside the United States. New York, Toronto, Canada, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Boston, Massachusetts, Sunnyvale, California, Chicago. I was actually there last week, had a lovely time. Boston, Massachusetts, Denver, Colorado, Gaithersburg, Maryland, Columbia, South Carolina, Minneapolis, Olathe, Kansas, Bangalore, India. It is early in Bangalore, right? Malaysia, also very early there. South Florida, welcome from near and far. So I don't think we have anybody from Europe here, probably because it's the middle of the night in Europe. Anybody from Los Angeles? Any neighbors? Minneapolis, I see. Mexico, it's getting close. San Francisco. All right, we have somebody from LA. Okay, welcome. Welcome again, near and far. I also like to learn a little bit about where you're located in the application process. And specifically, to start with, how committed you are to applying to Harvard Business School. So that should be displaying now on your monitor. Please indicate which option best describes you. Definitely, probably, maybe, and doubt it, but I'd love to convince my mother. My mother would love me to convince you otherwise. I'm going to close the poll. We're at 78% and share the results. So it's 69% definitely applying to Harvard, 21% probably, 10% maybe, and 0 doubt it. Okay, so you are a slightly more committed group than this morning. And then the next question I have for you is, when are you planning to apply? And choose the option that it's the earliest round you're going to apply. The options are definitely applying round 1, planning to apply this cycle, round 2 or 3, hoping to matriculate in 2020 or later, and just plain old not sure. I'm going to close the poll and share the results. Again, with 78% voting, it was 54% are definitely applying round 1, 25% round 2 or 3, which would round 3 would be just for 2 plus 2, 21% hoping to matriculate in 2020 or later, and 4% not sure. Well, there's significant difference between this evening and this morning's audience because we have many more who are definitely applying round 1. I also sense that this is a much more domestic, or I should at least say North American audience than this morning. So we had a much bigger international representation. Last poll before we start. How many of you are in, we're going to do this, financial services, consulting, high tech, or other? Please choose the one that best describes you. I'm going to close the poll. And oh, this time we got 84% participation. You guys, again, thank you. And it's 26% are in financial services, 19% are in consulting, 13% are in high tech, and 42% are in other. All right, well, again, compared to this morning, which was a more international group, we have more in financial services, significantly more, 26% versus 15%, a little more in consulting, 19 versus 17, and fewer in high tech, 13% this evening. Let me just share, they're already up there, versus 20% this morning, and 42% in others, so a little bit lower there. Okay. Last question for you before I start doing the talking, and that is, how many of you would like 100% to know the 100% guaranteed route to acceptance at HBS? Raise your hand if you do. Well, over half of you raised your hand. I suspect that more actually would like it. But I hate to disappoint you, it doesn't exist, and I'll tell you why later on. I can't guarantee that the steps that I'm going to outline today will ensure your acceptance, but I'm absolutely convinced that they're going to enhance your chances. And that's, again, with almost 25 years of experience in MBA admissions. So the plan for the next hour is go through Acceptance 4-part framework for successful MBA application and apply that framework specifically to Harvard Business School. You can use the strategy framework on other top programs and also for 2+2. And then we're going to turn to the specific elements of Harvard's application and apply the framework there. I'm also periodically going to issue several warnings, things that you should not do, and I'm going to start with this one. You're not going to get into Harvard Business School by putting on some makeup or waving a magic wand. You need to submit a substantive application, and by substance, I mean competitive qualifications and an effective presentation of those qualifications. In other words, you need to demonstrate fit. Your overriding aim is to show that you belong at Harvard Business School. Now, in the question window, please, can you please tell me how you intend to show you belong? I know I'm going to go into it in a minute, but through essays and resume, okay, that's a good one, Ida. Being genuine while also showcasing growth, good, Emmanuel. Being honest, that's absolutely important, but I don't think it's going to be enough. By showing my past personal experience, what about that experience, Jasmine? Specifically, leadership and achievements, very good, Parole. Accomplishments and achievements, good. Demonstrate leadership in my resume application recommendations, excellent, Dan. Tell my unique story and leadership, very good, Violet. Achievement and endeavors, good. GMAT, the GMAT definitely plays a role. Okay, let's go into the framework. You've given great answers. Most of your answers gave a part of what you need, which is understandable given the kind of space constraints that you're laboring under. I'm going to take the next, 40, 50 minutes. But my point, the thing I really, really want to get across this evening, morning for some of you, evening for most of you, is that you need all 4 elements of this framework, okay? So the first element is you need to demonstrate that you can do the work and excel. That's just foundational. I can't tell you how many admissions people I've spoken with and say, that's just a ticket of entry. It's a start, but you got to have it. You have to be able to convince them that you're going to thrive academically. In Harvard's words, it talks about analytical aptitude and appetite. It's a little bit more than just doing the work. It's thriving on it. The easiest way, the most basic way to show this kind of analytical aptitude and appetite, or that you can do the work, is through your undergraduate transcript and test score. You want to be at or above averages for accepted students, ideally for both grades and test scores. But Let's say your grades are problematic. Is it possible to convince Harvard to accept you with below average grades? Yes, it's a little bit more difficult, but it is possible. So what do you need to do? Realize that the average entering GPA for the class of 2019, which is the class that entered last September, is a 3.71. That number isn't a ceiling and it isn't a floor. It is an average, and that means that people are accepted with GPAs below that number. However, also realize that the farther below you are, the farther away below you are that average, especially if you combine that low number with a low test score, the harder it is that you can effectively demonstrate you can do the work at Harvard Business School. Now, let's say your test score is fine and you have the other qualities that Harvard Business School is looking for, but you do want to show them that you can do the work in an academic setting. What should you do? Consider certificates like the CFA if it's relevant to your career goals. Take business-related classes and earn A's in them if you have a lack of quant classes or some poor grades in quant classes. If your quant skills are weak, but your grades overall are good, consider something like mbamath.com or quant courses at your local college. For example, Stats for Business, Calculus, if you have the prerequisites, Economics 1, Accounting 1. HBX Core has tremendous credibility at the Harvard Admissions Office, though it does not guarantee acceptance, and it certainly isn't required. Somebody asked me that this morning. It is an excellent option. MOOCs are also possible, but they don't quite have the credibility of graded courses. So again, if you are trying to show that you're improving your quant skills because you've been away from math, MOOCs can be a good option if you also have the self-discipline to attend them. A high test score can mitigate, at least somewhat, a low GPA, especially if combined with some of the other steps I just mentioned. For the top 10, including Harvard Business School, you want to be at the 80th percentile, ideally in both quant and verbal, whether your grades are good or below average. The median GMAT for the class that entered in 2017 is 730. The total range is 580 to 790. Now, don't count on being the person accepted with a 580. There is somebody who got in with that, but there aren't too many. And I guarantee you that the person who got in with a 580 has some absolutely unbelievable qualifications otherwise. The average GRE scores are 164 and 164 for a total of 328. If you're considerably below on either the verbal or the quant, do consider a retake. If you're not sure whether to retake, we go into it in these two resources, and we'll be sending out the URLs later. The first one is a short video. The second one is a full webinar, but it's a recording of the webinar. So take a look at it. So the ability to do the work is generally evident in your transcript and test scores. That's that analytical aptitude and appetite, the objective elements of the application. But it's not exclusively present there. And realize that the transcript is not just looked at in terms of grades. It's not just the stats. Harvard Business School is looking for, and I'm quoting, individuals who enjoy lively discussion and debate, close quote. And that can come through via your essays, your resume, your recommendations, the courses you took in college, not just the grades you got, and of course, extracurriculars. Remember that somehow, some way, you need to show you can do the work effectively and not struggle with either basic math or communications, especially in Harvard's case-based method. Second part of the framework, have a clear, realistic idea why you want an MBA and how you intend to use it. Okay, I'd like to know from you, why is your post-MBA goal important to top MBA programs? A little less so to Harvard specifically, but still wants to know it. Why is it important to them? Why do they care? What are you going to do after your degree? Law schools don't. Rankings. I'm not sure about that one. Part of the MBA legacy to ensure that you will get hired. That's pretty important, right? They do want to make what you bring to the school. That is something, I guess your post-MBA goal is something that you're going to bring to the school. They want to make sure they can help you is the basic reason. And that's why for many programs, it's a key element of the admissions process. For Harvard, de-emphasizes it a little bit, but still it does ask you for your intended post-MBA information. And they want to know industry, function, and then they want to briefly tell us more about your career aspirations. Now, the first two boxes function, and industry are the basics of a post-MBA goal at any MBA program. Harvard says that they just use that information for statistical reasons, and I have no doubt that that is the primary use of that information. However, they're not using the box for statistical information. They want you to tell them a little bit more. And as with most things in the application, you want what you put there to complement the rest of the application. In D. Leopold's words, I don't think it's really changed since he left, at least not this part, they want to see direction, not a quote-unquote laminated life plan. So how could you use this at least the 100 words approximately, the 500 characters in that box? It's a very open-ended question. You could discuss greater career aspirations and goals, some kind of societal contribution, or why this goal motivates you. How you decided to pursue this end? They could all possibly fit in that box. Actually, any one of them could possibly fit in the box. I don't think all of them could. You can also think about what you really want Harvard to know about your career aspirations, because you're going to have different boxes for job history and community service, and you want this aspiration to build logically from what you're putting in the other boxes and what you will learn at Harvard Business School. And they know what they're going to teach you. Don't worry about that. Now, admissions at the end of the day should be able to connect the dots between where you've been, and by that I mean your undergrad studies, your professional experience, yes, your community service, what you're going to learn at Harvard Business School, and they have a really good idea of that, and your short-term goal and your long-term goal. For some of you, that's going to be really easy. Let's say you want to move up in consulting, for example. Well, in that box, you could write about the impact you intend to have as you move up in consulting, perhaps going a partnership route. If your connection between your past and your desired future via the MBA isn't obvious, make it clear, connect those dots, but you don't have to abandon or hide a non-traditional career path or goal or change. Just make a logical case for it. For example, let's say you are a biomedical engineer who works for a biotech company in medical devices. Now you want an MBA so that you can move into general management or perhaps launch a startup. You're making, in that case, a change from a technical role to a general management role via Harvard Business School's general management education with enormous strengths in both entrepreneurship and connections to the strategy consulting world. It makes sense. That's part 2. Okay, so part 1 was show you can do the work. Part 2, have a post-MBA goal that requires the education Harvard Business School is offering. Number 3, show that you share Harvard's values and have the character it seeks. Now, Harvard is really clear about its criteria for admissions and the kind of people it's looking for. It says very clearly it wants candidates who have a habit of leadership, analytical aptitude and appetite, and engaged community citizenship. And we're going to unwrap each of those right now. So leadership is the first one, and I think it's really the most important one. Several years ago, I was at HBS, and I had a meeting with one of the professors there. And in the course of my meeting, much to my surprise, he asked me, what is the common thread I see among our accepted Harvard Business School clients? In other words, our clients who've been accepted to Harvard Business School. And I thought about it a second, and I said, leadership and impact. And he smiled and the conversation moved on. And before I left, I asked him, you've seen far more students, Harvard Business School students, than I have in my career. I mean, he works with hundreds of, tons of them every single day. That's his profession. And I work with applicants to a variety of programs, including Harvard. What's the common thread that you see? And he said, well, I smiled when you answered because it's exactly what I would have said. I don't think that's accidental. I think that the Harvard Admissions Committee is choosing to admit people who have leadership, who are leaders, and who are people of consequence and impact. So that's one point I want to make. I also want to point out that, as you know, Harvard Business School places a lot of its grads in strategy consulting. I recently interviewed Keith Bevins, who's a global recruiter for Bain & Company. And in talking about resumes, he mentioned that he really wants to see resumes that talk about impact and achievement, as opposed to those that just describe responsibilities. I thought it's an excellent point, again, in terms of leadership. Leaders are people who just unless they are, leaders by title, they go beyond. They assume responsibility. And when you're talking about either in the job history, the resume, or your essay, what you've done, focus much more on achievement and leadership, on impact, than just on description of responsibilities. Now let's move on to analytical aptitude and appetite. Grades and test scores are certainly evidence of this quality, but it's also a desire to learn and analyze. It's critical thinking, which is going to be vital in the case-based method. Harvard wants, and here I'm quoting, the ability that you should have the ability to master analytical and quantitative concepts. So analytical could be obviously quantitative, but not necessarily. And they want prepared students who can assess, analyze, and act upon complex information within often ambiguous contexts. Now, the case method puts you in the role of decision maker and makes you sit there as you read a case and think, what would I have done if I was a protagonist? And what Harvard is looking for is your ability to learn and change after mistakes, your ability to learn and change as a result of success. That's basic analysis of what's going on in your life. In a nutshell, can you grow, or are you going to just do the same thing over and over and over again? Over and over and over again is not what they want. And then the third element in terms of their values and criteria is engaged community citizenship. I think engaged is the key word there. It's active. And it's and community service is a great place to show the impact that had so impressed the professor and me. Yes, you want to have impact on the job. I'm not saying you don't. But remember, it's a habit of leadership that Harvard is looking for, and obviously engaged community citizenship. It's also frequently easier for you folks who are still fairly junior in your careers to assume responsibility and take a leadership role in a community service context than on the job, especially if you're in a highly hierarchical firm. Ideally, you want it in both places, but don't focus exclusively on professional contributions. Now, community service or engaged community citizenship, realize that community is kind of a funny word. Sometimes it's just assumed to be the neighborhood that you live in, your geographic community, and that certainly is a type of community. But the truth is that most of us are members of multiple communities. There's our alumni association. There's our professional associations. There's our work community. There might be affinity groups, be they sports, music, arts, ethnic arts, sector is another way Sharon's suggesting. Religious communities, ethnic communities, certain political perspectives have their own communities. Anytime that you're involved in any of your communities and you assume responsibility for an outcome in your community, that is community service, that is engaged community citizenship, and if you have an impact, that's of course leadership. You also don't have to join an existing organization. You can start or launch a new initiative, and that's if you see a need in your community or that hasn't been met and you start an organization to meet that need, that's definitely engaged community citizenship and leadership and initiative. Now here's again one of my warnings, okay? I want you to note the difference between mouthing platitudes, like just repeating over and over again, engaged community citizenship, habit of leadership or analytical aptitude and appetite, and actually showing that you have those qualities. The first is really just spitting back the website and showing that it's not the same as showing you share the values. But examples in your bullet points, examples in your essay, bullet points in your resume, items in the job history or the activity history, that's substance. And if you exhibit these qualities in those places, it's going to be far better than waving a magic wand or putting lipstick on a pig, which is what happens when you just spit back the website. So you don't have to spit back at all. You have to show that you will contribute and take advantage of Harvard Business School's 6 differentiators, perhaps even as you contribute to them. And they are, as you can see on the screen, global intelligence. Perhaps you've worked and lived in multiple places, in which case you can bring some global intelligence to your classroom. Learning and practice. Did you like experiential learning? Have you participated in projects that were impressive? Perhaps on the job you learned a lot by certain projects that you either participated in or learned from. Entrepreneurship and innovation. Are you an innovator on the job? Have you had a startup or participated in a startup? Were you active in your sorority or fraternity. Those would all be evidence that you will fit in at Harvard's community and continue Harvard's tradition in these areas. And that's very different from spitting back the website. So really study both the criteria page and Harvard's 6 differentiators. Another warning, a lot of applicants focus on rankings and brand. Yes, I know Harvard has a dazzling brand, no question. But if you can quote the rankings of all the schools that you're applying to for Business Week, US News, Ports and Quants, Forbes, Financial Times, and Economist, you are wasting way too much time on rankings. And you probably are obscuring the fit aspect of admissions because you're focusing on the wrong things. And the result would be that you blend in. You want to stand out in a positive way. And that positive way is by showing what in your background and your experience demonstrates fit with Harvard's criteria and culture. You want to show that you have distinctive experience and perspective to contribute. Remember, Harvard has lots of applicants and it can really be choosy. And that leads to my last strategic point, the 4th part of the framework. Demonstrate that you'll be able to contribute to class discussions and field experiences, the school's community, and ultimately make the committee proud that they admitted you. You want to show that you're going to make a difference. So how do you do that? Well, you want to reveal that you've contributed in the past, that you've had impact in the past, and you can do this, again, throughout the application and your interview. So the question becomes, in terms of substance, how I started this webinar, have you contributed in the past? Harvard Business School wants givers, not takers. Where have you made a difference? And I'd like you to answer that in the question window because I've been doing too much talking. It's time for you to do a little bit. Where have you made a difference in the past? Where have you contributed? Can you give me a couple of examples? In the question window. Where have you made a difference in the past? Company volunteer events. Okay, Yagpal, that's if I mispronounce the name, I apologize. Can you give me a little bit more detail? How big were the events? What kind of team did you manage? Did you raise money? Did you just have a good time? Which is fine. Taught junior classes. How many people did you teach? Sharon writes about India Economic Project to support the defranchised women, seed money from undergrad university. How much money did you raise? How many women were empowered by you? How many women started voting? Brought a water distribution center to a rural village in Jamaica. Excellent, Jonathan. How many people lived in the village? What were some of the complexities of the project? And you don't have to tell me here and now, but those would be some of the things I'd like to know if I was reading your application. Volunteer with an organization that helps sexual assault prevention. I give speeches to hundreds of high school students. Excellent. Okay. Worked for Red Cross during a flood. That's from Preeti. Again, how many days or hours did you spend working for the Red Cross? What was the impact of what you did? How many people did you help? Raise money for community festivals and charity. How much? I'm trying to get you to be specific and concrete. Okay, here we go. Raised $40,000 as a young professional board member of Big Sister Association. That's now we're starting to get specific. Okay, I'm seeing now. But you, in general, you are all kind of vague, and we're gonna see in a minute 60,000 RS. I'm not sure what that actually stands for. I realize it's the Indian currency. Okay. I hope it's coming through that concrete and specific, concreteness and specificity are really important if you're going to try and show yourself as a person of impact. So part of it is the substance, and many of you gave some very substantive answers here. And some of it was community service, some of it was professional. I want to talk for a minute, and somebody's asked, do you have work experience quantitatively and qualitatively that will allow you to contribute in class? Quantitatively competitive work experience in Harvard is, the sweet spot is really 3 to 6 years. They will consider nobody with no full-time work experience, a few with 1 year, a few more with 2 years, and then the sweet spot probably will go up to 8. Above 8, I think you're at a disadvantage at Harvard Business School. Not that you're automatically rejected, but I think it starts to become a disadvantage. qualitatively, which is far more important than the quantitative, because obviously there are tens upon tens of thousands of people who have 3 to 6 years of work experience, not to mention 2 to 8. Qualitatively impressive work experience, again, you've made a difference. You've been a contributor and you've progressed at an above average level. So that's the substance of being able to contribute distinctively or demonstrating that you're going to make a difference. What about the way of presentation? Remember I said you have to present your qualifications effectively. And yes, the assumption of admissions is that past behavior predicts future behavior, but how are you going to stand out in a constructive way in the way that you present yourself? Well, I'd like to do a little experiment now. And I think the experiment will illustrate it better than I can in a lecture format. So look at the poll I'm presented. You can choose multiple options here. How many of you have worked in finance or consulting? How many of you have traveled outside your home country? How many of you have volunteered in some capacity in college or since? All right, we have 62% having voted. Let's get it, 70%, let's get it up. You guys are a pretty active bunch. Anybody else want to, again, you can have multiple options here. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll now. I'm going to share the poll with 79% of you having voted. 65% have worked in finance or consulting. It's actually the exact same number as this morning. 95% have traveled outside the home country, and 92% have volunteered. So you're better traveled than this morning's group. Okay, here's another set of questions. And again, choose all the options that apply to you. How many of you have worked for a hedge fund focused on emerging markets? How many of you have consulted for pharmaceutical companies exploring entry to new markets? And how many of you have volunteered as a camp counselor for a wheelchair-bound, ventilator-dependent teen? I don't expect as many of you to vote for this one as the previous ones. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll. I'm going to share the results. And the results are 10% have worked for a hedge fund focused on emerging markets. 20% have consulted for pharmaceutical companies exploring entry to new markets. And 5% have worked as a counselor for a wheelchair-bound, ventilator-dependent teen. Okay, what's the difference between the two sets of questions? In the question window, please. What's the difference between the first set of questions and the second set of questions? Right, concrete and specific examples. You're right, Mahek. First set was broader than the second set. That's right. The second set is much more specific. Specificity, specific. Right. What happens when the questions are specific? Actually, they were all very much similarly focused. Answers are unique. Exactly, Violet. You stand out. Ooh, nail on the head, Blaine. Unique and original experience. You distinguish yourself from the others. Right? When you talk in generalities, you sound like everybody else in this webinar and probably in the applicant pool. Very good, Pearl. You get clarity. But when you talk in specifics, you're automatically distinguishing yourself. And that's part of what I wanted to get across in terms of how you present your qualifications. So I hope that now you see how specifics differentiate you. And you have to, and when you present yourself, I hope you're going to keep that in mind. So are you an engineer or a transportation engineer? Uniqueness, you're right. Are you a consultant or a healthcare consultant or forensics consultant? Did you volunteer or did you found a new organization to address a specific need in your community? However you define your community. Why is distinctive contribution so important? Well, I'll tell you why. Admissions is a two-step process. The first part is determining the qualified, and there are always too many qualified. The second is selecting from among the qualified to create a diverse class and rich learning environment. And that second step in this process injects a highly subjective element to the admissions process. It's also why, by the way, there is no 100% formula or recipe for acceptance at Harvard Business School or any top MBA program. The Harvard Business School admissions office wants to create the most interesting, diverse class possible. And if you don't have something distinctive to contribute, and you don't have to have climbed Mount Everest or swam the English Channel or done anything like that, but you do have to present yourself in a way where they can envision you contributing distinctive experience, initiative, and perspective. And the implication from the selection part of the process is that Harvard Business School has no reason to admit an applicant who lacks something distinctive to contribute. Now, let's review the 4 strategic steps of this framework, okay? Demonstrate you can do the work in Excel is number 1. Reveal a goal that requires an HBS MBA. Show that you share the values and have the qualities Harvard Business School seeks. And also, reveal an ability to contribute a distinctive element to your class. Now, let's look at the distinctive elements of, actually, before we go on to the elements of the application, I thought I'd take a question or 2, okay? We don't have a lot of time, and I don't want to go too much over. I almost always go somewhat over. And actually, there are 2 very similar questions from Emmanuel and Julie, so I'm going to address both. What is considered above average level of progression, and what does quality professional contribution look like? Is it just a series of promotions, or is it more than that? Above average level of progression or quality, or series of promotions will differ from field to field and job function to job function. But there are going to be superstars in any field, and they are going to be promoted faster than their class or than people who graduated and started a job at the same time as them. It's those people that Harvard is looking for. And I hope that helps, certainly in terms of above average level of progression. So if you're going along with your class, that's fine. But if you are the youngest person doing whatever it is that you're doing, or if you are promoted 6 months or a year ahead of your class, that's above average progression on the professional progression. In terms of contribution, what does it look like? Again, it'll look like different things in different professions. This is something that we work with our clients to bring out constantly, Emmanuel. It can't, certainly a series of promotion that's above average would tell the admissions office that you've done something that caused your employer to think very, very highly of you. But it's not just the promotions, it's what you did to earn the promotions. And the other part of it is, what if you're in a fairly flat organization? Then it's going to be the level of responsibility you've both been given and assumed, or been entrusted with and assumed. And as long as those responsibilities are increasing, it's not so much your level or your title, it's what you're actually doing. So I hope I've addressed those 2 questions. And let's see. All right, if your entire career has been dedicated to the social impact, I think you mean category or center, can this count as the community service portion? Yes. Though, as you'll see when we get to the Harvard Business School application, they are going to ask you also for things that you like to do when you're not working. So it might be, certainly you'll be showing plenty of engaged community citizenship in Harvard's terms, but you're not going to want to leave that section of the application blank either. And again, this is the kind of thing that we work with our clients on. So I think I've answered those questions, and we're going to go on. Let's now start looking at the application. Let's start with your resume and the job history. So the resume is for Harvard Business School 1 to 2 pages, and Harvard in its job history gives you a lot of room, a lot of space to talk about what you've done professionally, even though they only ask for the 3 most recent jobs. Now, if you look at this, one point I'd like to make here is you have 250 characters, which is roughly 50 words, 50, 100, 150, 200, 250. And if you have 3 jobs, it's 750 words, and if you then add the community, the activity descriptions, it's another 750 words. You're going to be putting more words here in these boxes than you are in your essay. These are important. At a recent webinar I attended from Harvard Business School, they emphasized that these boxes replace several essays in their application. There used to be 6 essays in Harvard Business School's application. So don't think of these as something that you can just whip off, the night before you hit submit. Think about them and make sure that all elements of your application fit together and present you much like puzzle pieces in a puzzle do, and they all fit together and complement each other. And again, as I've said repeatedly, focus on achievements. Now, clearly, Harvard asks for key accomplishments, but even in describing your role and responsibilities, see if you can't highlight achievements or unusual aspects of your responsibilities, like youngest person doing whatever it is that you're doing, or youngest person to achieve whatever, okay? And as I've said and emphasized, focus on achievements and contributions or impact, not mere descriptions of responsibility, even where Harvard asks for roles and responsibility. So some examples: you led a team or led a cross-functional team of 5, and you were the youngest member. As I've tried to illustrate earlier, quantify your impact whenever possible and show how you went beyond your responsibilities. The activity portion of it: list up to 3 extracurricular activities in order of importance to you. And Harvard's instructions are: please tell us about things you do while not at work or in class, including other activities like community service here as well. So for Sharon, who says she works in community service, maybe it'll be yoga, maybe it'll be a dance class, maybe it'll be music, maybe it'll be sports, maybe it'll be political activism. I don't know. It'll be something different from what you do and are paid to do. And the other thing that Harvard says about this section is we use this section to get a sense of the leadership roles and activities that attract you. So as always, Harvard Business School is looking for leadership, and they're trying to get to know you here. I don't think that all 3 of the activities have to show you in a leadership role, but they are looking for that habit. So if you can, maybe 2, how about that? You think that you can handle that? I think that would be great. All right, let's go on to the essay. This is the same essay that Harvard has had for the last, I think, 3 years now. As we review your application, what more would you like us to know as we consider your candidacy for the Harvard Business School MBA program? Well, my first advice to you to answer this question is to really think about what you want Harvard Business School to know that isn't reflected elsewhere in the app. What are you truly proud of? Think of Harvard's 3 criteria. It could be context for events listed in a resume or activity list. It could be a challenge you faced in achieving what you've achieved, something you've overcome. It could be a pivotal moment. It should be something that only you could write and something that you would want to share with the Harvard Business School committee. Again, something you're proud of. Now, I'd like you to, using the worksheet if you have it, take a minute and jot down some ideas of topics you would like to cover in your Harvard Business School essay. You don't want to write a book, so don't throw everything in, as you'll see in a minute. But think about some topics, something you're proud of and you'd like them to know about, and that perhaps you're either not going to mention elsewhere or you're not going to have the room to provide the context that will be so important to understanding that element. What your Harvard, okay, you can jot that down, take a minute. What your Harvard essay shouldn't be, it shouldn't be a copy and paste of your response to Stanford's What Matters to You Most and Why. And you shouldn't take, as I indicated a minute ago, the kitchen sink approach of throwing everything you want them to know. Choose the most critical and most impressive. And although there is no word limit, be concise. They don't want to read your version of War and Peace. They don't want to read anything long. Harvard and most busy people value concision. Most business people value concision. This is business school. Don't write more than necessary. Additional information. Harvard has a brief additional information section. Please share that here if you need to clarify any information provided in other sections of the application. This is not meant to be used as an additional essay. Please limit your additional information to the space in this section. So use the additional information section to explain something that needs clarification or context. They don't want more. It has a 500-character limit, and that is roughly 100 words. The interview. Prepare for a probing interview with someone who has closely reviewed your application. They may ask you to connect the dots, to explain a decision or pivot point in your life, or they might throw at you an unexpected question and they want to see if you can respond thoughtfully. What is the purpose of the Harvard Business School interview? To evaluate your fitness for learning in the case-based method and to assess your fit with the Harvard Business School community. So be prepared to tie your past to Harvard Business School and your future. Prepare stories and examples that show you as a decision maker and leader. Prepare examples and anecdotes that show you in a community or group setting and as a giver, not a taker, as a person who has made a difference, a person of leadership and impact. In terms of the interview reflection, Harvard here is letting you have the last word. And if I were writing an interview reflection, what I would want to do is go and just think about the interview. Sit down, find yourself a quiet place. It could be on the Harvard Business School campus, it could be elsewhere, and just think about the interview you had. Ask yourself, what do you think you answered well? What do you wish you had been asked? What do you feel you need to clarify? And I have a blog post on this. It's for those things that you wished you had said or wish they had asked that you have the interview reflections. And remember, this is an email. It's an opportunity for you to demonstrate your ability to communicate when you don't have weeks to spend on something. So keep it concise. This is not War and Peace again or anything long. It's an email. Now let's go back to your goal of submitting an application to Harvard Business School. Show that you belong at Harvard. I'm going to ask a question now. I'd like you to respond in one question window. If you put it in multiple windows, I can't track it. The first three to answer this correctly, each gets a copy of MBA Missions for Smarties, Kindle outside the US, paperback, or Kindle in the US, your choice. The question is, what are Harvard's 3 criteria for admissions? Okay, James, you got it. Munkali, you have it. I think Jonathan got it. Habit of leadership, engaged citizenship, and it's actually community citizenship, but I'll give it to you. Analytical aptitude and appetite, but you got it. Okay. Habit of leadership, intellectual aptitude and appetite, engaged community citizenship. Those are the 3 criteria that Harvard has, and they are really important. Now, let's one more time review the 4 parts of the framework. And then we're, in a few minutes, going to start the Q&A. And Natalie Greenblatt Epstein is going to join me for the Q&A. First element in the framework, provide evidence you can do the work. 2, have a realistic goal requiring an MBA from Harvard. 3, demonstrate that you meet Harvard's criteria and share its values. And 4, that you have an ability to contribute to Harvard Business School's class discussions, teamwork, the school's community, and ultimately make the school proud. And here's all 4. And finally, or almost final word of advice, the admissions committee readers are sharp, intelligent professionals. Don't try to craft, fake, or fool. The best presentation of you is an authentic reflection of your achievements and dreams, keeping in mind the 4 things that will make Harvard want you. Now realize that a Harvard Business School application, this is what I started with, requires all 4 elements of this 4-part framework, not just 1 and not just 3 out of the 4. Because to get accepted, you really need to show that you both belong at Harvard, that's the first 3, and stand out in the applicant pool. This framework gives you the what of a successful application, and I've tried to cram it in. I've not held back anything and make this as valuable for you as it possibly can be. At the same time, I also know very clearly that implementing these suggestions is hard, and it can be best done with advice of a skilled consultant. So you now have the what of a successful application. You need the how and how to apply it to your individual circumstances. To be accepted, you need to get accepted and work with one of our outstanding consultants. We want to guide you in showing that you both belong at Harvard or whatever MBA program you're aiming for and stand out in the applicant pool. We want to guide you in creating an application that as a whole spotlights your strengths and mitigates your weaknesses. An application that accomplishes everything we've discussed here today. Now, here's what you get when you work with Accepted. You get access to expertise and experience. You can reduce your stress. This is one of the most common, that, by the way, is one of the most common bits of feedback we get from applicants. You save time. You optimize your school choice and application, and you learn how to mitigate weaknesses. That's what you get when you take advantage of Accepted's team of outstanding consultants. Now, some may say, isn't Accepted expensive? We're definitely not cheap. We don't make any such claims because of the quality of our staff. However, there are also expensive risks, as you can see on the screen, associated with not using Accepted, and those are not talked about so much. Reapplication can easily cost a couple $1,000s, especially if you have to retake the GMAT. One additional year of pre-MBA earnings can cost in the 5 figures. One additional year of a job you dislike. And then there's a potential that you could have gotten into a better program with lifelong higher earnings and network. and that could cost you in the 5 or 6 figures. Every year, we work with applicants who talked to us a year earlier and decided, after taking the do-it-yourself approach and getting rejected, to work with us this time around. They would have been better off working with us initially, and so would you. But enough from me. What do acceptance clients say? I'm going to take excerpts from most of these. I did find out just over a week ago that I was admitted to HBS. I definitely would not have been as successful without your help. This is for one of Esmeralda Cardinal's clients. And the one on the right. And yesterday I got the good news, and it was from Harvard. I'm absolutely thrilled. Mrs. Euphoria, I want to take out a moment to thank Accepted, Jennifer in particular, for all the help and in ways that went beyond admissions consulting. Or this last one. It's a wonderful feeling to have been accepted by Harvard, a school that until now I had only dreamed of attending. Can you relate? But sincerely, I could not have done it without the help of Cindy. She made sense of all my confused ideas and inspired me to write well, but the best part was her editing. It was almost magical. Different people, different challenges, and different fears. The same result at Harvard Business School, acceptance. Now, I can't say that all our clients are accepted to Harvard Business School, but we'd sure like to use the same magic of expert insight, insightful individual advising and editing that we used with these clients to help you get accepted to Harvard Business School. Here's what they did and what I suggest you do. Visit accepted.com/MBA package, choose a service that's right for you, get the guidance that you need, and apply confidently and effectively. And as I said at the very beginning of our webinar, tomorrow we're starting a sale, a one-week sale. It ends on the 28th. And you can save $100, $200, $500, or $1,000 depending on how much of our services you actually purchase. So, you can check it out now, contact us ASAP, and then, be ready to purchase while the sale is ongoing. Now, I'm ready to have the Q&A, and Natalie Grimblatt Epstein has joined us. Natalie, are you there? Natalie,
I am here.
Okay. She's a former admissions director at 3 top business schools. She's been a consultant with Accepted since, I think, 2008, right, Natalie?
That is correct.
And she has had clients accepted every year to Harvard Business School. So let's get started with a Q&A. Let's see. I know that Rachel has selected a few questions. Okay, Avishek is asking, how do you show progression in non-traditional professions? Natalie, you want to take that one?
Oh, I wish I knew what those non-traditional professions were.
Do you want to share what the profession is? That might help us out a little bit. Occupational therapy.
Okay. Boy, I'd love to know why you want to go to business school as well. So I think we have to go back to something Linda said earlier, which is about demonstrating your impact, right?
Right.
So how many patients have you helped, or what kinds of things have you done organizationally to make your OT group a better group? Have you been able to address things that'll streamline efficiency, or have you been able to reduce costs somehow? So you do need to look at this with a business hat on and think about what are some of those things that you can show, including customer satisfaction or a low return rate for the people that you're working with in terms of OT.
Really good and great answer, Natalie. Thank you. And the other thing I would say, which isn't exactly your question, but I would say that for you in particular, even at Harvard, your post-MBA goal is going to be important. They're going to want to know why, just like Natalie did, just like I did. So that's, what's the connection, where, kind of what's going on here, okay? Are you going to do something that's OT related ultimately? All right, let's look at a couple other questions. Julie is asking, how do you ask for a letter of recommendation from a current manager whom you worked for less than a year, about 10 months?
I have an answer for that one too.
Go for it.
I think, so I've had a lot of clients who struggle with the issue of asking any manager, like it's going to, they're going to have issues with the kind of work they're going to get, or they have a fear that this person is going to say, okay, then pack up and leave. I think the way to approach this is really ask for the advice of the manager to say, I've been thinking about getting a business education. What do you think about that? A master's in business. What do you think about that? And if they say no, that is not the right recommender to ask. In which case, you'll then have to describe why this person was, you asked another person who had a better understanding of your leadership and team skills, and you can go that route. So with the 10-month person, you do need to highlight everything that you want them to highlight in the recommendation. You want to highlight what skills you want this person to address. You need to give them examples of when you've demonstrated those skills. The two most common questions, because this is on the common recommendation form, is how do you stand out amongst your peers? So again, you need to figure out what you want this person to say and give them some guidance. And the other is, when you've taken advice, it's a criticism question. People misinterpret that question to think, I'm going to write a letter of recommendation that looks really similar to an annual review. But it's not. It's really about advice and how you take advice and how you've grown from that advice. So you need to lay that out for this individual. But first approach, it would be, what do you think of me getting a master's in business administration degree?
The other thing that Harvard is really clear about is if you feel that approaching your current supervisor is somehow going to jeopardize future opportunity, that they don't want you to approach your current supervisor. Go approach a former supervisor or supervisor at a previous job or something like that. They're really clear about that one. But I think Ella gave you some good ideas about how to approach your current supervisor, because if you can do so, that's clearly the best. I have a question here. I am an engineer and have been into tech throughout. How can I differentiate my profile from the prospective applicants? Let me count the ways. That is a very good question, but it's very difficult to answer in a vacuum without knowing anything about you. So that's something the kind of thing that we really work with clients on. We learn about our clients. We then work with them to highlight, and Natalie is great at this, what is distinctive in their background. Now, for somebody from a very common professional background or a highly technical professional background, we're going to try and emphasize any leadership experience that you have. We may focus a little bit more on bringing out some interesting non-professional aspects of your background. And again, and anything that would be more business related, we would try and highlight. We might tell you to go do some things for the next year and apply the phone. Yes, another possibility. Natalie, I'm sure you're going to have a lot more to say on this topic.
Yeah, I actually didn't catch the full question, Linda.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me repeat it. Let me see if I can. I have a question. I'm an engineer and have been into tech throughout. How can I differentiate my profile from the prospective applicants?
Oh, I actually think it's a similar answer to what I said about recommendations and preparing supervisors for recommendations. So you need to prepare yourself for this. You need to think about, when you've been working on your tech projects, when have you been able to increase efficiency or increase customer satisfaction or increase market share? What is the result of the problem solving that you are doing for your organization or for a client's organization? So you need to, again, put your business hat on, think about ways you increase revenues, decrease costs, increase efficiency, increase customer satisfaction, increase shareholder value, and as Linda mentioned, leadership should stand out in all of this. The other thing I know a lot of the tech engineers don't think they have, but they really do, is great team skills. So think about what you've done on a team that's really moved your team forward and therefore has moved the organization forward.
Okay, great answer. From Jonathan, for my next role, I had the choice between choosing an engineering role or a business development role. I'm going to assume, Jonathan, that you've been in an engineering role. If I'm wrong, please let me know. What are your thoughts between choosing the roles? I enjoy business development more, but heard that Harvard likes the technical background.
Oh, you want me to take that one?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So I always think you should go for what you really enjoy, because when you enjoy it, you have some passion behind it. I don't think that you should write your application in thinking that this is what Harvard likes and this is what Harvard doesn't like, because I've had people in engineering roles that have done extremely well with Harvard and people in business development roles. So don't think that because you're in a business development role, Harvard's going to automatically deny you. That is not how this works. You just really need to shine in either role. And for me, it would be the one in which you have the most passion, because then you will take on risks and demonstrate leadership and demonstrate teamwork and demonstrate, your ability to analyze issues and problems and skills that Harvard is actually interested in. But, it doesn't come down to, do I take this role or this role because that's what I think Harvard wants or doesn't want.
Great answer. I would, again, assuming, Jonathan, that you have the engineering background already under your belt. I'm just guessing that, and you have an opportunity now to move into more of a business role, and that business role is also going to be closer to your post MBA goal. I would encourage that role. Now, I'm making a whole bunch of assumptions, but if they're true, that would be my recommendation, because that will make you more attractive to your later employers. It'll also show you in a business mode. Again, Natalie's been saying, put on your business hat, put on your business hat. You'll clearly be wearing a business hat. So, and I think you'll be getting valuable experience that you'll be able to bring to Harvard. Okay. Now we have a question. I'm not going to pronounce your name, but the question is, how does accepted help me? I've just graduated from my bachelor's. Okay, if you just graduated from your bachelor's, my advice to you would be to get a great job and work for at least 2 years before applying to Harvard Business School. Harvard does not accept people straight from college and rarely accepts people with just 1 year of work experience. Natalie, do you want to add anything to that, or do you disagree with me?
No, but I also don't think there's, I do think there's value in preparing early. So if you want to just, touch base with us and, year 1, year 2, you can certainly touch base with us. We're happy to give you advice on next steps and what you need to do to really grow within your career, grow within your community service or anything that's really going to differentiate you and make you stand out. But there's certainly steps you can take to on your path to an MBA where you might not get advice, and in your job, you can certainly come to us, and we're happy to talk you through it.
Sounds good. Okay. We have another question along these lines. A couple of questions about being early and late in the process, I guess. Kisa asks, you mentioned that attempting Harvard Business School after 8 years of experience could be difficult to be accepted. Could you further explain why this could be the case? I think that's one I'm going to take, because I was the one who said it. If you look at Harvard, typically posts a histogram over the summer where it shows the average amount of work experience of its incoming class. And the the number of members of its incoming class with more than 8 years of work experience goes way down. If you look at that histogram, it's the 3 to 6 years of experience that the bulk of the class fits into. So that is why I made that statement. I think that if you do want to apply with 8 years or more of work experience, you can certainly give it a shot. I think it's really clear that you show them you have realistic post-MBA goals, that you're not like, if you say that you want, let's say, an entry-level position for an investment bank or a management consulting firm, that might give them pause, because those kinds of firms tend not to hire people with as much experience as you have. Now, if you have your own connections in those firms, or you have a job you're going to be going back to, or your firm is sponsoring you, or it's a family business that you're going to go to, then obviously that would also be something that you want them to know. Natalie, do you want to add anything to what I just said, or again, do you disagree?
No, I don't disagree. That's exactly what I found with my clients as well. So, if you have something compelling at the, tail end of that bell curve, they're still going to think about admitting you. The other fact about this histogram is that the number of applications from older applicants also goes down. So
yeah, you don't know exactly the percentage. You're right. No, I thought of that.
So just take that with a grain of salt. But it is true that more applicants, in the middle of that bell curve, that sweet spot, are more likely to get admitted. And then if you're an older applicant, want to talk to us, happy to do that too. But I need to know very specific circumstances, and this form is really for something a little bit more general.
Okay. Let's see, we have some other questions here. I'll be going into my 3rd year of work experience after college. Is it too early to apply to business school? It's from Aida.
You want me to take that? So 3 years. 3 years is starting that sweet spot. You're going on the upward trend with that bell curve. So you will be starting business school with 4 years under your belt. And right. And so, but your application will have, 3 years worth of great information to share with the admissions committee. So no, I do not think it is too early to apply with 3 years, but I need to see, again, the quality of the work experience, the impact that you've had in year 3. And as Linda mentioned earlier, we may recommend that you wait a year so that you can do something to make you a stronger candidate. But in general, 3 years is great.
Right. Agreed. Okay. Now, Preeti is asking, I think in connection to the question about the fellow who just finished his undergraduate. So he's already graduated. Can't we just apply to the 2+2 program?
No.
Natalie, you want to take that one? I'm
yeah,
asking you,
the no.
the easy ones, I'm giving you the hard ones, right? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So the 2+2 program was really designed for people that are, in their senior year of school, and they want to begin that program after 2 to 3 years of work experience. So 2+2 is kind of a misnomer, because most of the 2+2 candidates are doing 2+3. And if you're interested in Stanford, that's a little different. You could apply to Stanford deferred after you graduate, but the 2+2 is very specific about the kind of candidates that they want, and they really want seniors. I mean, the whole idea behind this program is they didn't want really great candidates going to law school, because law school doesn't require full-time work experience, and business schools do.
Okay, great answer. All right, getting some really good questions. Blaine asks, any specific advice for military applicants? Well, my short answer is Harvard loves military applicants. And I would suggest, again, that you emphasize the responsibilities that you've handled, the impact that you've had, and of course, the leadership that you've assumed. Natalie, do you want to add to that?
No, I mean, my husband's former military, and he went to business school after he was done with his military career. And you know, there's lots of leadership that I see in many of the military candidates that come to me for consulting. I think a military background is fantastic for business. You have a lot to share and offer. You might not know the jargon, but you know, again, that's where consulting can help you in taking off the military jargon and putting them on a business jargon.
Okay. All right. So Dan asks, I will be 3.5 years out of school when I submit my application. Should I include extracurricular leadership roles from my undergraduate career on my resume? Natalie, do you want to take that?
You need to, Linda, you went out for me again.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'll repeat it.
No, I think it's my phone, actually.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yes, can you please repeat?
And this is from Dan. I will be 3.5 years out of school when I submit my application. Should I include extracurricular leadership roles from my undergraduate career on my resume? I'll let Natalie answer in a minute, assuming she heard me, and I'll take it. I would say that will depend very much on what you've done in the last 3.5 years. If your more impressive extracurricular activities occurred in the last 3.5 years, then leave off the ones from college because you're not going to have room for them. If the more impressive leadership activities in a community service context occurred in college, then include them. But anyways, Natalie, what do you want to say?
I would include them if they were leadership, high impact experiences. So regardless of what you've been doing in the last 3.5 years with your community, you might want to show a little diversity because they also want to know that you did things while you were in school, and that you had a life outside of the academic. Again,
there's that word habit of leadership.
Yes.
And this is from MM. I have a PhD in a STEM field and have been working in a tech role at a biotech company for a year, but I don't have enough traditional work experience. I guess there's a question mark there. I guess but do I have enough traditional work experience? Do you think my PhD research experience will count towards work experience? So I guess my question to you is, how long have you been, for 1 year. So I guess he's been working after he got his PhD a year ago. Natalie, you want to take that one?
That's a toughie. Again, it's one of these, it depends questions. So I would like to know what you're doing at the biotech. If you're like a bench scientist at the biotech, you'd need to craft a really interesting essay to make sure that they understand why and how you're going to make an impact in business. I'm assuming you'd want to stay in biotech pharma after business school. And, those are hot areas. But PhDs, they always admit PhDs, some PhDs, every year, but it's really, it's really difficult because most of the experience that you've had has been research oriented. And, quite frankly, that's, an academic conversation. It's not the high impact they're really seeking. But again, I will offer to talk to you offline because it's just, I'd have to ask you a bunch of questions to find out, what direction you need to go in.
Right.
And to get to me offline, there's just like a button on the accepted website that says, I'd like to talk to Natalie.
Yeah, you just look for Natalie's bio, you'll find it.
Yeah, and then you'll find it. So.
Do you want to post Natalie's bio, Rachel? Link to Natalie's bio. Okay, another question here. Let's say your GPA, just hypothetically, is a 3.3 and your transcript shows a number of classes that were retaken. Do you think it's possible to still showcase a story of growth 3 to 4 years after exhibiting undergraduate immaturity? And would you recommend against admitting to that immaturity within the HBS essay? You want me to take it, or do you want to take it?
You go ahead, and then I'm sure I'll have something to add.
Okay.
We see this a lot.
Yeah, and people make mistakes. Again, the answer is basically it depends. It depends on what was the trend of your grades as an undergrad. What was it, just immaturity? Was there anything else going on? What have you done since then to show that you are mature? Have you taken any classes since then? What is your GMAT or GRE score? All those things will play a role in whether I would say you could recover from this or not. And that would, that would probably take some individual, that would definitely require individual advising and individual work. The other element is, what about your leadership and impact? Is it really impressive? If it is, and you can also show that you have that academic ability, you just were immature at 18, 19, etc., then I would not discourage you from applying to Harvard Business School. I would encourage you to apply to Harvard Business School and other programs that will help you achieve your goals and where you're probably more competitive. So it would be kind of a two-pronged or maybe even three-pronged approach. Natalie?
Absolutely agree with that. I do think you need to cast the net widely. We see this quite often, and we would need to understand what everything in your background, and what kind of picture you paint for HBS. But you have to consider all the candidates that are applying to HBS, and there might be some candidates that have the kind of impact that you have, but don't have the grade issues, and they're more likely to choose the one that doesn't have the grade issues. Again, I wouldn't discount it. I would never ever tell my own kids, in fact, to not go for the big stretch schools, because you never know. You absolutely never know what's going to happen.
You also might want to take, don't apply round one, or maybe don't even apply this year. You might want to consider waiting a year, getting a superior GMAT, getting some recent A's, perhaps progressing a little bit further in your career, and then being that much stronger of an applicant. It's another option. Again, there are lots of it depends here, and ways to go. All right, one more question. I'm applying for HBS this summer, I guess this fall. I'm also considering to change my job this summer. Will that hurt my application? A recent change of job, would it hurt my application? Should I stay at my current job and try to get a promotion? I really like the new job. It's the field that I'm planning to work after MBA. Do you want to go first, or you want me to go first?
I think there's going to be a big question mark as to why you're applying to business school having just started a new job. And this might be a case where I'd say, why don't you wait a year and get some traction in your new job, particularly if you really, really like it. Even if it's going to be an issue for you on the age end, you need to show some traction with your new job, and you're really not going to have anything to show them if you're applying, for example, round one, which you said summer, so I'm assuming you're applying in the September 5th deadline. So I just feel like you need some traction.
Okay. All right. I like Natalie's answer. I think I would probably recommend that you wait a bit, if this is a job that's going to take you closer to what you want to do post MBA, then I would go for that job and just apply next year. Maybe consider a round 2 application, but don't apply at the same time. Okay, I want to close the Q&A portion. But I want to also thank you for coming. I want to thank Natalie for participating in the Q&A. I want to thank you all for coming, your questions, your time, your attention. And I want to share one final thought and story before we say it's calling a night. The thought: there is a paradox inherent to acceptance at top business schools, including Harvard Business School. You have to demonstrate that you fit in and stand out. By fitting in, I mean that you belong at the target school in terms of your goals, academics, work experience, and values. That you're going to be a valuable member of their community, not just what you're going to get, but what you're going to give. For Harvard Business School, that means showing that you have the habit of leadership, analytical aptitude and appetite, and engaged community citizenship that Harvard requires. Standing out, that means you need to stand out in a highly qualified, intensely competitive applicant pool. Show that you're going to contribute distinctively, add a special something to the school's community, and make the admissions committee members proud they voted to admit you. Let me give you an example of how one of our outstanding consultants, in this case Natalie, works with a client to successfully navigate that paradox at the heart of admissions. Now, Natalie puts the importance of distinguishing yourself front and center when she works with her clients to Harvard Business School. She tries to unearth what she likes to call the gem or secret sauce in her client's profile. So, for example, with Sally, and that's a pseudonym, that gem or secret sauce was an unusual hobby that complements impressive but more typical work experience. It also shows initiative, critical thinking, a sense of adventure, and leadership. Sally's results, and this is what she wrote. Hold on a second. I have great news. I got accepted by 4 out of 5 schools, and one school even made me a great scholarship offer. Most likely, I will move to Boston, HBS, in August. I couldn't be happier. Sally followed the steps on the screen, the steps I outlined earlier. And as I mentioned, starting tomorrow, you have a full week of a great sale on our services. With Accepted's help, Sally found her secret sauce and unearthed the gem inside of her. She earned her MBA at Harvard Business School. We'd love to help you discover, present, and polish the gem that's inside of you so that you can join her and become a Harvard Business School alum.